So I wrote this book, The Academy. The story, The Academy, I've been working on for 13 years. It's a story about your father's in it. It's about the Iranian Revolution, a kid who gets recruited to a secret society, and they help develop leaders that go around the world and do big things. And the villain in the book is a Savak member that turns against the Shah, okay? And when I wrote this book, this villain was the former deputy director of Savak. And I've been writing about this guy for many years. Story gets out, and all of a sudden, this gentleman calls me, and we start having a conversation together and says, hey, somebody wants to talk to you. No problem. And we get on a Zoom together. And he says, I was a former deputy director of Savak. I said, really? Yeah. Okay. Interesting. I'm like, shit, this is the guy. So I said, you know, you wrote a book apparently that you're talking about Savak. Yeah. I'd like to read it. I send it to him. He reads the book. Comes back, calls me, schedules a time. Him and his wife come to my house, and we spent 8-9 hours together. Great conversation. And this is Pahlavi Sabeti, which I'm sure you know who he is, and I'm sure you've had conversations with him, or maybe you haven't. I don't know if you've had conversations with him or not. So this guy was a former. If you can pull him up, Rob. When you know you hear some stories, Pahlavi Sabeti. Rob, there is no videos on him, but if you type in Pahlavi with a Z, Sabeti, Sabeti, right there, that's him. And if you go to his Wikipedia, some of the stuff that he did as a Savak member to go in, and I'm sure you've seen the documentaries or the stories, and you know how he was able to get in and get some of the Hezbollahs with women, and you know get them to do what they. This guy was he had an element of J. Edgar Hoover, but he had an element of understanding how to control some of these guys, and he worked under your father. Probably the relationship didn't end on the best note, but they were there where, hey, these today people and the Khomeini people, we have to take them a little bit more seriously. You know, we can't be this naive to think that this guy's weak and he can't topple you and get rid of you, right? So the entire premise of this is of a couple moments of either missed opportunities, naivete, or arrogance that we all flirt with. All leaders flirt with. No one's free from it. Like, it's not like, oh, you're such a noble, humble guy, you're never going to flirt with these things, right? Do you think it's a bit naive or even a little bit arrogant or maybe overly confident to think that, you know, this approach that we're going with can, the very traditional, logical approach is going to be the one that's going to bring freedom back to Iran, or there needs to be some creative ways to be able to go up against a regime like Khamenei that are capable of doing anything? You have to be able to fight with them. Like if you wrestle with a pig, you know, you sometimes got to get down and dirty with them. Do you think that needs to be the case, or do you think it needs to be now the traditional way of doing things?
You know, Patrick, one thing that is interesting is that having had the benefit of time for people to, contemplate, do their own diligence and research, it's very interesting that the younger people in Iran today, who, by the way, reproach their parents, what were you thinking of backing up this revolution, were often critical of my father in the sense of, if he knew what was going to happen to us, how could he possibly allow this to happen? In other words, they blame him for having allowed his arch enemies basically succeeding and taking over. But the same students who today revere him, chant his name, and as a result say, the legacy that I have on my shoulders is as a result of when they call my grandfather and they say, may he rest in peace, Reza Shah Ruhat Shad, or the way my father today is revered in Iran. Forget the fact that their peers in that age group back then were asking for his head. And imagine, that's my point. Imagine if my father, who by the way did warn many, look, understand what will be the consequence, not just in Iran, but for the whole region, that Iran will become Iranistan. It didn't take more than a year for the Russians to invade Afghanistan, by the way, after the Iranian Revolution. The whole area went south. Don't you think my father knew what was going to happen? He had two choices. Either stand there, push back, arrest a bunch of people, execute them, and maintain power, or say, look, after 37 years of reign, I'm not going to crack down on my own people. And he voluntarily left the country. It was a choice that he made consciously. Yours truly will not be sitting here with this amount of support from Iranians, because the same people who revere my father would have said he was a tyrant that tried to stay by killing his people, and he would have gone in history as a bloodthirsty tyrant, a little bit like Ceausescu at the end of the Cold War. So let's understand what it is that is at play here. It's damned if you do, damned if you don't. Well, I tell you what, I think my father made the rational, logical, moral decision, and which is why people today say that. And I understand why people are frustrated. Some young people say, if he knew all of what was going to happen to us, he should have stood there, fight. Why did he desert us? But they would have said the completely different thing had he actually done that. He would not be known as a patriot and somebody who built that country. They would say, look at this. He's killed so many of us. And the question is, let's assume he did that for a second. Would it really have made the difference? Would it really have changed things? There was euphoria at the time, Patrick. University professors were swearing that they saw Khomeini's face in the moon. You cannot reason with that mentality. So yes, there was a huge momentum as a result of the Marxists on the one hand and on the Islamists on the other hand, that certainly did not like our relationship with the Western world, particularly with America. That is the core of this regime ideology. It's anti-Western, anti-Israeli, anti-American thing. As I said, it's not just a slogan. They actually believe that. But today's generation said, we're not them. Today's generation said, whoever among our parents who thought that was the solution, and you pointed earlier that Khomeini had a message or had a clarity of vision, well, today understand what that vision was all about. It had nothing to do about Iran.
Oh, but that's irrelevant.
It had nothing to do about Iran.
I understand that, but it just tells you how effective it was. You have to give it credit for effectiveness.
Yeah, we can fool some of the people some of the time, but ultimately you cannot fool all of the people all the time.
For 46 years, they've had rain. For 46 years, they've had rain of that place with some insane policies.
Well, it took the Russians almost 80 years to get rid of communism.
Do you want to wait that long?
No, I'm not saying we need to wait that long. That's a lesson in history. We should not wait that long. But then again, why do you ask me the question?
Yeah.
This question should be posed to Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. Do you understand the consequences of continuing in a policy that actually
that's not their
keeps
number one.
This regime? Well, it's not their number one. But
it doesn't need to be their number one.
Well,
but that doesn't need to be their number one. It needs to be the Iranian people's number one, not his number one.
No, I understand.
Okay,
I understand. But let's say, apart from domestic American politics,
sure,
economy, this, and
fine,
that.
Foreign affairs,
right? Okay, what's at stake right now?
A lot.
Okay, let's talk about it a little bit.
What do you? Which
China?
angle do you want to go with? Sure.
Russia.
Okay.
The conflict with the Ukraine,
sure.
The Middle East, the escalation, the nuclear threat, terrorism, radicalism, etc. Today, you're talking about American universities fomenting anti-American, anti-Israeli or Jewish rhetoric, financed and trained by the Iranian regime, and so on and so forth. How could this not be an element under consideration of brushing it under the rug and trying to say, you know what, we had enough with dealing with the Middle East and its problems? You cannot just abandon ship in that sense, because if you think you don't want to get involved, they will keep you involved. They will force you to get involved. And again, you have to think about the solution, not being how can we contain them or how can we expect them to change their behavior. But say, let the difference be a different Iran under different circumstances. We need to have a meeting of minds. Otherwise, it doesn't matter what me and Iranians are going to do, as long as the world, and especially at its leadership in the free world, in the Western world, America, that has a big role to play here, depending on what they end up doing or not, could be the game changer. I'm telling you very honestly what I think it is. I don't disagree with you on that point. We don't have time to waste. And I'm not the only one saying that. I bet you many people in the region think exactly the same. And what has
I know
led them
that
to be
for-
confused is
yeah.
because the hesitancy or
Right.
lack of will to do anything from this end in Washington.
If you were interested in this topic with Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, odds are you're Middle Eastern, maybe you're Iranian, Armenian, Persian, maybe you're living in the Middle East, or maybe you're an American that wants peace in the Middle East. The last 13 years, I wrote this book called The Academy. It's a very interesting thing. I talk about his father. I talk about moments why the revolution took place with this character named Asher, who is half Assyrian, half Armenian, and he gets recruited to the secret society. And the villain in the book is the former deputy director of Savak, who is in the book breaking down why the fall of Iran took place, what mistakes that were made. And very interesting what happened when I wrote this book. I never wanted to publish this book until I finished building my insurance company. I published a couple months ago. Something very strange happened when I was at the tail end of finishing this book. I get a call from somebody saying the former deputy director of Savak wants to have a call with you. I said, the former who? Deputy director of Savak. They don't know the villain is in this book. That person had read the book. I have a Zoom with the deputy director of Savak. He reads the book, calls me back immediately. I need to have another part 2 with you. Did you write this book about me? Am I the villain in the book? I need to come and meet with you face to face. He comes to my house. My dad meets him. My wife meets him. We have an 8-9 hour meeting together at the house because of what perspective he had that caused Iran to fall. Some of that is documented in this book. Again, this is a fiction book based on true stories. If the topic of Iran, the revolution, leadership interests you, I think you would really enjoy reading this book, The Academy. You can go to Amazon or a QR code here to order the book. I look forward to having you read it and posting a review on Amazon because I read every single one of them. Enjoy the read. If you enjoyed this video, you want to watch more videos like this, click here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click here.